Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Peter Fincham.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
And this is the podcast for people who love TV and want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes in show business.
Yes.
Jimmy,
yes.
How are you?
I'm all right.
What have you been up to?
Well, at the weekend.
How was your week? Oh, go on.
It was a bucket list thing. I took my daughter Paige to see a recording of Strictly Come Dancing. In fact, I've just got out of the studio.
That's been on your bucket list.
4 days later.
What, as well as going to Machu Picchu and Peru and climbing Kilimanjaro, go to Strictly Come Dancing.
Well, I think I've done it now.
Yeah.
And
you work in television.
I do work in television.
So you know what it's like.
Yes.
Was it like that?
But I like hanging out with my daughter, and she, you grab the time you can with your adult children, and she was very excited to go, so we went along, and you go along at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they set you free at 11:30 at night. And at one point, the warm-up guy said, "Okay, folks, this has now turned into a hostage situation," but they do let you.
Do they bring you snacks and things? Do they let you go to the loo?
Yes. Oh, yes. You don't just micturate in the studio. You're allowed out, but you've got to hold your hand up like at school.
Yeah.
And then they come along, and at a certain time when there's a break or something, or the cameras are not on, you're part of the audience. They sneak you out. They kind of rush you out for a stealth pee.
And you pop around the corner to a restaurant
and then
a 3-course dinner.
No, but they've got guard dogs on the outside. It's you can't get out. There's barbed wire. I was hauled down off the wall at one point trying to get out in a kind of. I was, making a break for freedom. But honestly, it's a brilliantly run show. They do the live show. I happened to pick the longest show because all 15 couples were still in it.
Oh, God.
So
yes.
I thought maybe I should have got one towards the end where there's 4 couples in it. But it's great, and those, Claudia Winkleman and Tess Daly, they do a fantastic.
They're amazing.
They are absolutely brilliant.
I mean, when I was at the BBC, it was Bruce Forsyth and Tess Daly, and I went along several times, as you would as a channel controller. I once took my daughter, Fleur, who's now 24, so she'd have been about maybe 5 at the time.
It's been going that long, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, and longer, because it was commissioned before my time.
Yeah.
And I do remember Bruce Forsyth, he came out to do the warm-up, and he saw Fleur in the front row, and he grabbed her by the hand, took her out and danced with her, dance with her. And I'm not sure she knew who he was or what she was doing there. But to me as a dad, it was probably the cutest thing I'd ever seen. And we talked about Bruce before on this podcast. He was such a charmer.
He was.
He had full-on charm, and everything about it was absolutely delightful.
He was. Now, what have you been up to? What's been happening in the world of Fincham and expectation?
We had broadcast last week.
The Osbornes.
Yeah. This documentary about the Osbornes.
Because that's been on a bit of a journey, hasn't it?
It's been a bit of a journey, and it's quite an instructive journey.
I mean, Ozzy died, obviously, sadly.
Very, very sadly died, and our documentary went out on the BBC, but there's also a documentary that's gone out on Paramount Plus, and they cover slightly different things. But it was a lovely documentary, and it got fantastically well received. But what's instructive about it is that it was commissioned several years ago as a 10-part series.
Right.
It was like Return of the Osbornes, and it was going to be called, I think, Home to Roost, the Osbornes Home to Roost, because they wanted to come back from Los Angeles and spend their Ozzy's final years in their house in England.
Right.
But for various reasons, it never happened. They didn't come back. He had health problems.
Surprising, because he did look after himself.
So we were filming here and there, but never quite consistently building up what would make a 10-part series.
Yeah.
And then, as if you saw the documentary, finally they did come back and they'd done a lot of work on the house, and then, very soon afterwards, having done this concert, he died. But what I would mention here is, with a lot of organisations, if you offer up a 10-part series and are contracted to do a 10-part series, and you end up delivering a 1 × 60, you're going to be in a lot of trouble with them. But the BBC, they couldn't have been better about it. They were so supportive of it, very proud of the final film that came out. And it's just an example of, if you like, the partnership that can work when it does work well between commissioners and producers, because when you're going to anything that's got reality in it, real events, real people, nothing's predictable.
Of course.
You don't know what's going to happen. We'd have loved to have made a 10-part series. It never happened, and we're kind of proud to have made the one-off doc.
Yeah.
There's another thing I want to. This is also a bit of an apology to the BBC, because we were talking a week or two ago. I think it was last week, about Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the famous, iconic series with Alec Guinness on the BBC in the late 1970s,
yes.
I think, which I've always thought was one of my favourite series ever made. And Alec Guinness's performance as Smiley, unmatchable performance as Smiley. And I said, because I thought this was the case, that although shot on film, they kept it on tape, and the tape had degraded over the years, and now basically it doesn't look great.
Yeah, it looked a bit.
And Mike Collin, a listener, one of our listeners, has written to us to say, I'm completely wrong. Tinker Tailor still has its original 16mm film print and has since been scanned into HD. And the technical issue here is that if they've kept the original film print, it looks as if it was shot yesterday, and that's really good news. So I feel I misrepresented the BBC there. And if it does look that good, I might watch it again, because it's endlessly rewatchable.
Well, I have a feeling that this week the theme may be apologies. Should we start off with the first? Is this an apology from you, Jimmy? There will be.
I've known you for a very long time.
You're not a
man to whom the word "I'm sorry."
You knew me, Peter. You knew me in the 1980s, where all I had to say was sorry. Sorry about last night. Sorry about that.
But for slightly
I'll
different
fix the
things.
window. Don't worry. I mean, that carpet will come up lovely.
Let's get an envelope, because then we can get stuck into
Owen,
the subject.
bring me the envelope. Well done, Owen.
He comes.
Legal trouble in darkest Peru. 3 down. That really is cryptic, isn't it?
It is, but
I think we know what it is. Yeah. So, okay. So this is, and I have to say, I did enjoy reading this. This is about Spitting Image. Now, this is not the first time we've mentioned Spitting Image. The YouTube
about 5 times on it. It's 5 different episodes.
So. Well, Avalon needs all the help it can get. Peter, if we can help young John Thoday, starting off in his career, any help we can give him. But what's happened here is, we talked about this, that John Thoday and Avalon have launched Spitting Image on YouTube, and he has commissioned. He is funding 10 episodes of this. He's already getting interest from other potential sponsors, and it's doing rather. It's called The Rest is Bullshit, and it's a fantastic parody of the magnificent Rest Is franchise. And it's a podcast hosted by puppets of Prince Harry and Paddington Bear. And in the first episode, Paddington Bear's talking very gently like Ben Whishaw, and then says, of course, I don't talk like this. I'm from Peru, and I love cocaine. And he starts snorting vast bags of the Bolivian marching powder. And what's interesting, he doesn't offer Harry any. And as we know, Harry is partial to the odd toot, because he said so in his autobiography.
But not on his visa application.
But not on his visa application. But what is brilliant is that it kind of reimagines Paddington Bear as this kind of party animal, literally party animal. Well,
yes.
This week, what's happened? Studio Canal have issued a writ, and they own the rights to Paddington. They make the movies, and they are complaining that the Rest Is Bullshit, starring Paddington Bear, is bringing their brand into disrepute.
And do they think that a generation of children who love Paddington Bear will now grow up thinking that he's a foul-mouthed, cocaine-snorting Peruvian gangster? That's presumably what they're worried about, isn't it?
I think so. Now, listen,
We've all had some frivolous lawsuits in our time.
Yeah, I'm the first in line to say the French love a good joke about themselves.
It's not even about themselves. It's about Paddington Bear.
I know lots of French people and organisations, and they love you taking the piss out of them. They just revel in it. And but it does.
Have you seen this week's episode, by the way? Because I have seen this week's episode.
I haven't caught that.
Oh, well, they've quite adroitly found their way around this. They've just turned him into Rupert Bear. In other words, he's now wearing a Rupert Bear costume.
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny. So it's Paddington wearing a Rupert Bear costume.
Exactly. And I think they're going to keep bringing the changes. So whether they've done that for comic reasons or because they've got Studio Canal's lawyers, massed ranks of lawyers.
But they're not going in. I think they're going in because obviously Spitting Image has, in many ways, they've lampooned real people for 50, 40 years. But I think they're going in on the copyright, aren't they? It's a branded thing, it's a trademark thing, but it's going to go nowhere, isn't it? It's going to go nowhere.
I mean, you know, obviously the world is full of lawyers, and you know they're always ready to put together.
I know.
Lawsuit. I don't want to be anti-lawyers here. We have a very, very good lawyer checking our show, and who knows whether this entire Simon, who knows whether this entire section will appear in the podcast this week. But they've got a job to do. But this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, the idea that, as you say, Spitting Image, having lampooned human beings for the last 40 years, suddenly finally come unstuck when they lampoon
But do you know,
seems ridiculous.
I spoke to John Thoday yesterday, right?
Yes. Is he lying awake at night worrying about it?
I rang him and he called me back and after we both stopped laughing, he said they got a letter where basically the lawyer said, Paddington's very upset.
Who can this be who's very upset?
Well, Paddington.
Paddington himself. He's got feelings, does he?
No, the two things we know about bears, Peter. One, they shit in the woods. And two, they don't fucking speak. Right? They don't speak English. They don't speak Spanish. They don't speak bear.
They don't snort cocaine, as far as we know.
But and listen, I wish Studio Canal all the best with John Thoday. Because if there's one person on this planet I wouldn't want to sue, it's my old friend John Thoday. I think by the end of it, they'll have the Studio Canal won't exist. There'll be no studio. It'll just be a canal.
Avalon will make the next Paddington movie.
It will take over Studio Canal. John will find some way of bringing them down, and that will be the end of them.
But obviously, you know, we've both spent big chunks of our career involved in the kind of comedy that is almost designed to give lawyers sleepless nights and to cross lines and to make people think, I can't believe they've done that. They've gone too far. People sometimes ask me this about Brass Eye that we made for Channel 4 in the 1990s. Would anybody broadcast it today? I'm not sure they would. I'm not sure they would because it lampoons celebrities without their permission. It
gulled them
into things under false pretenses.
We did a show I called The Revolution We Televised, and these were two very, very clever guys who ran the show, Hayden Prowse and Rubenstein.
Julian Rubenstein.
Yeah, and they were very smart, and they managed to get themselves into Mansion House for the great speech given by the Chancellor, who was at the time George Osborne. And they're both kind of a couple of posh boys. So they're in black tie, and they swan in, and they manage. And I'm actually on holiday at the time, and I read my newspaper, and there on the front page of the newspaper is a photograph of George Osborne with these two guys flanking him, and he's holding to the camera a book which says Maths for Dummies. Right? And I think, oh my good Jesus. Well, the Conservative Party complained bitterly to the BBC, and Mark Thompson replied to them saying, this is fair game. This is just us lampooning the powerful, and we did nothing wrong.
Yes.
So, you know, we someone backed us. I'm not sure that we get that far these days. I just don't know. I think it is a different world. But this week we have. When you make a mistake in a show, you have to own up to it. And last week we made a mistake in the first episode of Have I Got News for You?
First episode of this new series.
Hosted by the fantastic Victoria Coren Mitchell. Now, she had nothing to do with this. She just was reading it out of the script. But we said that the company founded by Euan Blair, which is fantastically successful. I mean, it's not making a profit.
He's very rich, Euan Blair, isn't he? Richer than Dad.
They said he's worth about 350 million.
Yes.
And he runs a company called Multiverse, which is it's an educational-based company which is provides apprenticeships. And I think he's got an OBE or an MBE for services to education. We said that the new ID cards that the government are going to impose on us, that his company would have something to do with that.
Right.
And we were wrong.
Okay.
And as soon as it went up on the show, we realised that
So it was broadcast.
It was
so
broadcast.
It wasn't picked up between the recording and the broadcast.
No, that's the problem, isn't it? So what happened was, now we've been doing the show for 35 years.
Yeah.
This kind of thing's happened twice in 35 years, but it's twice too many. And of course, on Saturday morning, we took the show down off the iPlayer. We re-edited it so that the mistake, was taken out. But I wanted to find out what went wrong. Now, at Hatchet, we try and run a kind of no-blame environment, so we find out, what goes wrong, and we put it right. And what was interesting was this, and this is why I want to talk about it, is that because we now have, generations of younger producers who are coming into the business, and they are digital natives, they're called, they're marinated in social media. And I said, where did we get this story? And apparently the story was put on by a freelance journalist, I won't mention her name, a freelance journalist who put on her Twitter feed this story about Euan Blair and ID cards. And the producer said, well, it had nearly 3 million views that day.
Therefore, it must be true.
And no one questioned it. And I went, okay, and did we verify it anywhere else? And then faces became very red around the table, and God bless them. They're a fantastic team, the Having News for You team, and they felt terrible about this, really, really awful, which is the right response. So we've now got a new rule. We don't take stories off social media.
You get a second source,
and we get normally they do, and it just got through the net, and it landed on air. But had that been more egregious, I mean, it's not defamatory in any way. In fact, the lawyers didn't pick up on it. Our lawyers and the BBC lawyers didn't pick up on it. It's a low-level mistake, but nevertheless, it is indicative, and it was good to spot it, because what you wouldn't want to do is to make some kind of egregious claim about somebody and it is defamatory. I mean, we've only been sued once successfully, and that was by the Maxwell brothers when they were up on trial in the days of Angus Deaton, your old client. They were in the odd one out, and he referred to them as being crooks. And Ian Hislop, quite rightly, he was an expert on the libel laws and contempt. He said, we can't say that, Angus. It's sub judice. This is contempt of court. So Angus laughed and said, oh, well, I'll see you in court, Ian. And I was sat next to the wonderful Roger Law, who sadly passed away recently, and the lawyer called Roger Law, and I said, don't worry, Roger, we'll cut it out. He said, no, it's just a joke, isn't it? It's obviously a joke, a bit like Paddington Bear. It's obviously a joke. We'll leave it in. So on Monday, we got a writ from Peters and Peters, and we ended up in court and being fined £10,000 for committing contempt.
And Euan Blair isn't suing you, so
no. I think it's one of those things where it's embarrassing for the team, and they made a mistake, and we learn from our mistakes if we own up to them. It's not fake news; it's mistake news. So the reason why we look a bit different now, Peter and I, is that we've just recorded our podcast. We went back to our offices. And I was told by the executive producer of Have I Got News for You that Multiverse has in fact contacted Victoria Corin Mitchell, who hosted the show. And it shows that unlike Studio Canal, Multiverse has a sense of humour. And of course, people with sense of humour have sense of perspective. And they sent her a very nice reply to her tweet. Vicky tweeted out immediately, if you saw the clip saying that ID cards, the contract has gone to Multiverse, it's wrong, we were wrong. And they've replied saying to Vicky, this is Multiverse, things we know how to do, upskilling the workforce in data and AI, things we don't know, how to do a brilliant job hosting a comedy quiz show, and how to build a digital ID card system. Many thanks for the speedy correction. And that's how the world should work. Do you not agree, Peter?
I do. And it makes you realise that it doesn't follow that because you work in some big company doing serious stuff that you don't understand the basic function of comedy and satire, and that it pokes fun at things, sometimes gets things wrong, but you're much better to shrug it off than make a big fuss about it. And if you make a big fuss about it, you're just in danger of looking a bit po-faced and humorless.
And I don't now begrudge Euan Blair one penny of the money that he's got and the fact that he's much richer than his father. I don't resent that at all.
And than us, and I'd buy one of his products if I knew what they were.
I'm definitely going to go out and buy some multiverse.
I'm going to go down the high
stuff.
street and see if I can invest in some of Euan Blair's doubtless excellent things.
Well, actually, we're now doing an advert for Multiverse, so maybe we'll get some free clubber. Yeah. Whatever the clubber is.
I don't think it is clubber.
Okay.
I think he's made us all this money out of producing nothing except a service. But good luck
for him. Good luck to him.
Anyway,
that's all from us. That was a kind of bit of breaking news that we thought we should just round off that story with, and now we're going to crack on with the rest of the podcast.
So here we go. Next, right, envelope. I was going to say envelope the Owen, which is like saying bolt the Bernie. For those who can remember what that means.
Ah, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, in the envelope.
Oh, in the envelope. Here we come.
Oh, in the envelope.
Envelope.
It sounds Welsh, doesn't it?
It does a bit. Yeah. The words in this envelope: commissioning news various from the BBC. They're getting quite gnomic, these envelopes, aren't they? Commissioning news various from the BBC. Apart from the others, why doesn't it say various commissioning news from the BBC?
I think he's having cognitive difficulties.
Is he doing this quite late at night? Okay, let's drill into this. So there's been commissioning news out of the BBC this week. John, is it Petrie or Petrie?
I think Petrie.
Okay, John Petrie.
I'm going to go with Petrie.
Had a comedy, has renewed his call for producers to pitch big family sitcoms.
It was a big interview, didn't he?
Yep. He says the BBC is keen to capitalise on the resurgent and interest in classic sitcoms like Fawlty Towers and The Office. They are from very different eras and they are very different in kind. Before anyone thinks of dashing off a traditional sitcom script, he encouraged writers to reimagine what a modern sitcom might be.
Okay. Should we spend some time doing that?
Yeah. I'll just read out the other bit of the quote from him. He said, people are returning to sitcoms because they have a high joke rate and a story of the week which allows them to dip in and out or watch their favourite episode 5 times. It's only really sitcom that can do that. I'm biased, he says, but I think comedy producers, writers and creators are the best people in the business to find solutions to financial challenges. That's a slightly different issue. And is that true or not?
He complimented his way into making cheaper programs there.
He does a bit, doesn't he? I genuinely think that challenge is a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, none of us are going to argue with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes he then says, oh, well, okay. And it's always worth remembering that it is mainly about characters, jokes and relatability. I think I'd have advised John to quit while he was ahead with this announcement. Yeah. I think that's probably gone on to say maybe one or two sentences more than we needed.
He's doing an interview.
Yeah, exactly. He's basically saying, bring us a brilliant sitcom and we'll commission it.
But he's also got an eye on cost, hasn't he? Because clearly, comedy's now costing. Obviously, everything's costing more and more. But your average comedy now is certainly north of £500,000.
Yeah, but it's still costing a lot less than a drama.
It does, but it's only half an hour long.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, depending on what we mean by a sitcom, it's in standing sets that you can...
but they're not anymore, are they?
Well, that's why I say depending on what we mean by it. But I mean, the classic sitcom, like Fawlty Towers...
Yes.
You know, you're in the same sets every week. You might have a couple of minutes of location stuff that you'll sort of knock off during the week building up to the recording. But that is nothing compared with... I mean, if you watch, modern drama, I don't know if you've seen it, for instance, the latest Steve Knight thing on Netflix, House of Guinness.
Yes.
That is so much, and you might even argue too much, about just production value on the screen.
But, if you think about the shows like The Office, that's quite cheap. I mean, it probably wasn't Ricky did 2 series. It's only in one set. I mean, there was a couple of things in the street, but mainly it's just
But it's single camera, and so it's not in a studio in front of an audience. We talked about this before.
But it's about like Outnumbered, which you commissioned.
Yes.
Remember, we did Outnumbered at 10:30 at night.
Yes.
Because George Dixon, your scheduler, understandably said, look, we're not sure about this because it's kind of a different thing. And then when it got great reviews, you moved it from 10:30 to 9 o'clock. And that's when we put the price up. But we made it for no profit. And we made it for a song because it was going out at 10:30 at night. And the money that the BBC put against 10:30 at night is a lot less than it puts against 9 o'clock.
But
so producers will make shows they believe in.
I get this, but although obviously John Petrie in this announcement is hinting at finance and try to say to producers, if you can be clever and make it quite cheaply, that'll help a lot. But I don't personally, I don't think this is really the issue, because you could say, what's the difference between 500,000 and 400,000?
That's 100,000.
100,000. But if it's...
And I'm not very good at maths, but...
if it's worth it, it's going to be worth it. What I find interesting is that this is not really a new announcement. I mean, he's done an interview and he's talked about it at more length. I mean, I think he's been saying this pretty much since he became the head of comedy at the BBC. And yet, why is it so hard to find them? Why are they, it's greatly in the interests of production companies exactly like yours and mine to answer this call and to come in and say, here is the new office of Fawlty Towers, or here is the new, it's not really that, is it? It's more the kind of straight down the middle, you might say middle of the road, mainstream appeal sitcom. And yet he's still having to make this call because he hasn't actually found them. We talked before about Not Going Out. Probably the only sitcom of this sort.
Which nearly got cancelled after season 3.
Yeah, I know, but it
John
wasn't.
John Thoday.
Well, there we are.
Who's basically Banquo's ghost in this particular episode. He bludgeoned it back onto the air.
Yes. I don't know if his lawyers would want to use the word bludgeon.
Well, he thumped the table and he said, "I'll make it." He
persuasively argued that it should continue.
And Jay Hunt recommissioned it.
Exactly. But what I'm struck by is everybody agrees that audiences like them. Broadcasters are literally saying, please bring them. Yes, we might try to bash you down on the price, but we'll pay for them ultimately. Get it right, they could run for 10 years. They could become new classics. And yet they're really hard to find and do. And that I find interesting.
Yeah, and often, if you think about Fawlty Towers, that got on because John Cleese was a big star. If you think of Only Fools and Horses, David Jason did many, many pilots in the early 80s. I used to work with him on BBC Radio. He was a great vocal comedian and brilliant at doing impersonations, but never really got any pilots away. In fact, the old joke about David is they had more pilots than British Airways, and he could never land one. And then Only Fools, he wasn't that famous. And he lands Only Fools and Horses, and of course so it's about actually taking a risk sometimes on people who are not that famous but are very funny. But
I don't think the BBC is saying they won't take a risk. I think they're saying they will take a risk.
Well, let's see.
Let's see. Of course.
If that works out in practice, because, it's difficult to launch new comedies, and I understand why you'd want a famous face in it, like a Martin Clunes or a Caroline Quentin or a Dawn French or whatever. But the truth is that, as we know, it's like catching lightning in a bottle. You've produced some brilliant comedies, and you can retrospectively see why it worked. But when you're making them, you're not sure it's going to work or not.
Sure. No, I agree with everything you say. I'm only kind of thinking, does this say something about the comedy world that there's a big demand for drama, and there's a lot of drama producers out there, which is why it's very competitive in the drama business. There's a lot of credible, experienced drama production companies, all of which want to get the same commissions and so on. And there's a lot of writers out there, and I remember this from my days at the commissioning end, running channels. At any one time, you had quite a big pile of drama scripts on your desk. Yeah. They weren't all the next Peaky Blinders, but there were some good ones among them, and you hoped that among them was a Peaky Blinders or a Downton Abbey or whatever. You never had a big pile of credible comedy scripts. Yeah. They were always quite hard to find.
Well, of course, I would imagine that the uptake of younger people coming into the business now is they are funneling into, if you want to write, you'll probably end up writing dramas. There's another BBC story this week.
Oh, okay.
There's another one, isn't there, about the BBC of they every now and again the BBC have to put out some of their shows to tender, so other independent producers can pitch for the business.
Yes, because and you've done this and won some. You do Mastermind.
We do Mastermind and the Proms.
Well, that's a great. You've done really well out of that.
Yeah.
Do you get free seats to every night of the Proms?
No.
Would you want to?
Yeah, no. No, I say Guy Freeman produces that through his company, Livewire, in which we have a 50% stake.
Yeah, but don't tell me if you suddenly decide you want to go and see some Bruckner symphony that's on,
Peter, I don't have the same patriarchal attitude that you have. You obviously...
Well, do you just have to queue up at the box office like everybody else?
I turn up with the promenaders. with my sandwiches. My wife and I, Karen and I, used to go to the Proms a lot, and then we started having children, and years ago, And I would get,
they're worth going to get away from the children.
and I would get these tickets.
You get a little bit of sleep.
Well, there was one night. There was one night where we couldn't go. I don't know, one of them had a sore throat or something.
Yes.
So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to waste these. I went up to the queue, and the queue of these devoted music
You
aficionados.
sold your tickets like a ticket town.
And there were two. I had 2 tickets, and I thought I'll give. There was a lady who she was wearing spectacles, reading a book very patiently. Been there for hours with a little rucksack on, and trousers and sneakers. And
we really need to know the details of her
I'm
wardrobe.
painting a picture for you, right?
Okay.
And I said to her, "Would you like this ticket? My wife and I can't come." And she said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yes." And I didn't want any money for it. I said, "Have it." And I went down the queue, and I saw a man who was dressed in a very similar fashion to the lady, wearing glasses, reading a book, with a rucksack, eating an apple.
Yeah.
And I said, "Sir, would you like this ticket? Only I know that you're a big music fan. You've been queuing up here for
But
hours."
you can only afford an apple.
And I said, so have a ticket. He said, "Oh my goodness, so fantastic of you. Thank you very much." And I went home to Karen and I said, "You know something? I've just given a ticket to obviously a single man in his late 30s.
They're going to get married. This
And
is
a
a
single
rom-com.
woman in her late 30s.
Yes.
And I think I may have started a very beautiful relationship." She said, "Or he might be a serial killer." I said, "Well, you know, it's 50-50. You got to take your chance."
Okay. But that's before you actually broadcast the
I don't know,
proms.
why are we talking about
Because
this?
I'm interested to know. It's a bit like what you wear for a parliamentary committee. I'm interested to know. You've got the contract to broadcast the proms.
Well, the BBC...
Come on, don't tell me you haven't got a free ticket or two.
I want to talk about this. This is quite a serious thing with the BBC, is that because they instituted BBC Studios,
Yes.
and for those that don't know, BBC Studios is an independent studio sitting inside the BBC, which apparently is hermetically sealed from broadcast. And
They don't even know each other's names, I don't think.
and they've gone out to the marketplace and they bought huge talent, like like your company.
Oh, yes.
So they invest in companies like yours, and they also have their own production centre. But the quid pro quo is they have to put certain titles up. So yes, Mastermind was put up, Question of Sport was put up, Songs of Praise was put up, and this week.
We've just had the results, the latest BBC tender process. I'm reading from notes here. BBC Studios has retained the contracts to produce Fake or Fortune and This Farming Life. Both titles, worth around £4.6 million combined, were put out to tender in February. And they've also recently won back £5 million Rip-Off Britain last month. And they were awarded a deal to produce CBeebies specials for 2 years from 2027. And I guess what the issue here is, does it sound as if they're putting a lot of things out to tender and mysteriously winning the tenders?
Well, this is the point, is that it's a real transparency issue. Or
is it that independents aren't really competing for them?
Well,
they don't want the contract?
Well, to be honest, they don't put Strictly up. They don't put EastEnders up.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what is the fine detail of this deal they did with the government in terms of, part of their charter is they're going to put, because BBC Studios used to be the BBC, and the license fee paid for the programmes. Once it becomes a commercial entity, BBC Studios now has a catalogue and is sitting on IP, which was paid for by the license fee, but now they're a commercial organisation. So the quid pro quo is, well, we'll put our titles out to the independent sector, and if they can demonstrate, which we did with Mastermind and we did with the proms, that we can do a very good job, then we'll give it to the independent producer. But it seems in this instance anyway, this year, that the BBC Studios have brilliantly proved to the BBC, a separate organisation. I know it's confusing because one's called BBC Studios and one's called the BBC, but they've got nothing to do with each other. And basically, they've won all the titles back. Now, to be honest with you, I wouldn't take any one of these titles if you paid me. Because
maybe the problem is they weren't going to pay you, or maybe there wasn't enough independent.
What is Rip-Off
an independent company?
Britain.
Well, it's
by the way, it's an unfortunate title to win back.
But you may know more about this, Jimmy, because you've obviously dabbled in this world.
I've dabbled.
Is the obligation the BBC have, or that the government has placed on the BBC, to keep putting these things up for for tender every 5 years or whatever? Or do you just put them up? How long is your contract for the proms?
It's renewable every 2 or 3 years or something.
But do you have to re-tender, or do you just renew
it? The BBC basically would say, well, we think you're not doing a good job, we need to put it out for tender again.
Of course. So you would think that from the Indies' point of view, these are really good contracts to get. I'm sure they're careful to make sure you don't kind of make too much money out of them, but I'm sure there's a margin in there for your trouble, and and it's business that goes through your books. It's kind of all good news. So why are we now in an era, it seems, in which independents aren't winning this? Is it because independents aren't trying hard enough because they're not interested in these contracts? I find that quite hard to believe. 5 million for Rip Off Britain contract, 5 million is a good slug of business to a lot of independent companies. Or is it that mysteriously BBC studios are now demonstrating they can do these things better than any indies? Well, I don't know. And we ought to be clear here. We are rather speculating here, and we're not casting any aspersions.
No. I mean, listen, it may be the case that there wasn't a massive interest in these titles, and the BBC.
There's a lot of indies out there, and they all want to work, and they all need business. So
and it's quite.
I find that very surprising.
It's quite a process that you go through.
Yes,
it's quite tortuous getting these titles, because then you have to take people on from those programs, and it's financially it doesn't make sense for a while. So you have to keep going with it.
All right, well, that's all for this week. Thanks very much for listening. Any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask, send them our way. We'd love to hear from you, or indeed to correct any mistakes, like last week when we got it wrong about Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah, but please don't sue us. You can send us an email, or you can get in touch via our socials, and all the info is in the description.
Even better yet, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? Thanks for listening, and if you've enjoyed the show, please do follow Insiders the TV podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Bye.